The great river Odo-I shimmered under the golden fingers of the rising sun, winding its way through the heart of Ilaomi, a village blessed by the ancestors. The people believed the river was alive, that it listened and spoke in the quiet hush of its flowing waters. It carried the whispers of those who had passed, those yet to be born, and those whose fates hung in the balance. Each morning, the villagers gathered at the riverbanks, scooping handfuls of its cool water to cleanse their faces, praying for fertility, protection, and justice. The elders told stories of the river's power, how it had blessed kings and cursed thieves, how it had swallowed men who dared to defy the gods. And on this morning, as the village stirred to life, the river watched. Abeni walked through the marketplace, her graceful steps as light as the morning breeze. She was the jewel of Ilaomi, the one whom mothers pointed to when teaching their daughters about virtue, the one whom men spoke of in hushed admiration. Her skin gleamed like polished ebony, her laughter was like the tinkling of river pebbles, and her heart was known to be as pure as the first rain. She had been promised to Olamide, the great hunter, a man whose strength and bravery made him a leader among his peers. Their union was to be a blessing upon their families, a match woven by fate itself. And yet, beneath her smile, Abeni carried a secret. She woke before the first cock's crow, a strange unease pressing against her chest. She sat up, her breath coming in shallow gasps, her hands trembling against the sweat-slicked skin of her collarbone. Something was wrong. A tightness, unlike anything she had known before, coiled around her chest like an unseen hand squeezing, pressing, taking. She touched herself and gasped, her breasts, swollen, heavy, growing. With every heartbeat they expanded unnaturally, pulsing with a heat that sent fear rushing down her spine. She stumbled to her feet, her vision swimming. The sun had not yet risen, but she could not bear the weight alone. "Mama," she called, her voice cracking like dried earth. "Mama, Efun!" Her mother appeared, wrapped in a thin cloth, her eyes heavy with sleep, until they fell upon Abeni. The scream that tore from Mama Efun's lips shattered the morning silence. By midday, whispers curled through the marketplace like harmattan winds before a storm. They say her chest grows. "By the hour," an old woman muttered, her lips pursed in fear. "Could it be a punishment from the river gods?" another asked, casting a nervous glance toward the sacred waters. "Or perhaps," came a third voice, hushed yet sharp as a blade, "she has done something to invite a demon into her flesh." The elders gathered beneath the ancient baobab tree, their weathered faces lined with worry. "We must summon the diviner," declared Baba Adeoye, the eldest of them all. "This is no common ailment. The gods must be consulted." And so, messengers were sent to the hills, where Baba Orunmila, the great seer, dwelled among the whispers of spirits. The wind carried the scent of crushed leaves and burning herbs as Baba Orunmila stepped into the village square, his long robe billowing like mist over water. His staff, carved with symbols of the old gods, tapped against the earth in a steady rhythm, each strike sending ripples into the unseen world. The sacred beads around his neck clinked softly, their sound a reminder that the ancestors were listening. He stopped before Abeni, his gaze piercing through flesh and into the trembling soul beneath. "The spirits do not strike without reason," he murmured, lifting a weathered hand to hover over her swollen form. Abeni could not speak. Her tongue felt as if it had been tied by unseen hands. Baba Orunmila turned to the gathered villagers. "We must seek the truth from the unseen," he declared. "Tonight, beneath the full moon, the spirits will reveal their will." Abeni's knees nearly gave way. The ancestors would speak, and she feared what they would say. The sacred grove lay at the heart of the village, where the spirits of old walked among the living. A fire crackled at the center, its flames dancing wildly as if possessed. The air grew heavy, thick with the weight of the unseen. The villagers stood in a circle, their breaths hushed, their eyes watching as Baba Orunmila prepared the sacred ritual. He knelt, spreading before him the cowrie shells, white as the bones of the long dead. His lips moved in an ancient chant, a song that tangled with the wind and carried into the darkness beyond. Then, a sudden shift. The flames leapt high, twisting into a shape that was neither man nor beast. Abeni's breath came in sharp gasps, her hands clutching her chest. The spirits were here. Baba Orunmila's face paled. His eyes flickered with something unreadable, something heavy. He rose slowly, the cowrie shells gleaming under the firelight. "This is no ordinary affliction," he said, his voice laced with something close to dread. The villagers leaned in, waiting. "Abeni is cursed!" Gasps erupted through the crowd. Some took a step back, as if fearing the curse might leap from her body to theirs. Abeni's pulse thundered in her ears. "Either she has angered a spirit," Baba Orunmila continued, "or she bears the weight of a grave, hidden sin." The murmurs grew louder. Suspicion thickened the air. Mama Efun clutched her chest, her fingers trembling. "But she is my child. She is innocent." Baba Orunmila's gaze darkened. "The ancestors do not lie." Abeni's legs weakened. A curse? A hidden sin? The weight on her chest seemed to grow heavier. The seer raised his staff, striking the ground with a force that silenced the village. "If the source of this curse is not revealed and atoned for," he warned, "she will perish before the next moonrise." Abeni's vision blurred, her world narrowing to the pounding of her own heart. Was this the price of her secret? Abeni sat by the Saus River, her knees drawn to her chest, staring into the flowing water that once gave her peace. But peace no longer lived within her. The weight on her chest was more than flesh. It was the burden of an unseen judgment. Her body trembled as the swelling worsened, her once graceful form now bent, her steps faltering like a woman far beyond her years. In the village square, women whispered behind cupped hands. "No mere sickness causes such suffering," muttered an old woman with missing teeth. "She has angered the spirits," another murmured. "Perhaps a demon lives inside her," a younger one added, her voice hushed with fear. Abeni clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She knew the truth, but to speak it meant to face the wrath of both the living and the dead. That night, as the village lay in restless sleep, Abeni sat in the dim glow of an oil lamp, her mind consumed by memories. She saw Tunde as he had been, tall and proud, his skin kissed by the sun, his voice like rolling thunder before the rain. He had come from beyond the great river, speaking of places she had only dreamed of. "Come with me," he had whispered, tracing his fingers along her palm. "I cannot," she had replied, though her heart begged her to go. "I will return for you," he promised, but he never did. The night he left, the river had roared louder than ever, as if calling him back. But he did not return, and with him he took Abeni's dreams. Now her suffering felt like the god's way of reminding her of her transgression. She had given her heart to a man who was never meant to be hers. Could they have been watching? Could they have seen her betrayal, her selfish desire? The thought sent a shiver through her bones. Abeni's mother, Mama Efun, had watched her daughter's slow suffering in silence. But silence could no longer shield them from the eyes of the village. One evening, she gripped Abeni's shoulders, her fingers trembling with both love and desperation. "Child, the ancestors do not forget," she whispered. "Mama, please," Abeni choked, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Tell me the truth," Mama Efun pressed, her voice thick with emotion. "What have you done?" Abeni opened her mouth, but no words came. To speak was to invite ruin. To remain silent was to invite death. Mama Efun sighed heavily, pressing her forehead against Abeni's. The gods will take what they are owed, my child. But if you confess, perhaps they will show mercy. Mercy? Abeni doubted such kindness existed for a woman like her. The sacred baobab tree stood at the heart of the village, its roots deep in both soil and legend. It was here that the elders gathered, their faces lined with wisdom, their eyes heavy with unspoken knowledge. Abeni stood before them, her swollen chest a mark of divine judgment. Baba Orun Mila, the village seer, raised his staff, its carved head gleaming under the setting sun. "This is no simple ailment," he declared, his voice firm, filled with the weight of the ancestors. The villagers murmured. "What is it then?" a voice called. "A curse," Baba Orunmila answered, his gaze locked onto Abeni. A chill passed through her. "Tonight the spirits will speak, and the truth shall rise with the moon." The villagers gathered under the full moon, its silver light casting eerie shadows against the sacred grove. Abeni was led to the center, her heartbeat thudding like the drums of an approaching war. Baba Orunmila sat before a small fire, casting kola nuts and cowrie shells upon the earth, his lips moving in silent prayer. The flames flickered unnaturally. The air shifted, a sudden gust of wind howled through the gathering, sending shivers down their spines. The ancestors were present. The diviner's hands trembled as he read the sacred shells. His brows furrowed, and for a moment there was only silence. Then the wind screamed. Abeni gasped as the fire twisted upward, forming the shape of a woman. The villagers cried out in fear. Baba Orunmila's voice was hoarse when he spoke. "She is here." The air turned ice cold. The trees shook though no wind blew. Then a voice. Abeni. Abeni's breath caught. She knew that voice. A shadow stepped forth, its form flickering like dying embers. It was If, her twin sister, lost to the land of the dead. The villagers fell to their knees, whispering prayers for protection. "You stole what was mine." Ife's voice rippled through the night, filled with sorrow and rage. Abeni shook her head violently. "No. If, you betrayed me in life, and now you wear my curse." The fire crackled, the earth rumbled. Abeni fell to her knees, her hands clutching her chest. Tears streamed down her face as she stared at her sister's ghost. "Please, If, forgive." "Me!" But forgiveness was not the way of the ancestors. Gasps rippled through the crowd as If spoke again. "The man you loved, the man you longed for, he was never yours." Abeni's world blurred. "Tunda was mine, sister," If continued, her ghostly eyes burning. "He was promised to me, but you—" Abeni let out a strangled cry. "I did not know. I did not know he was meant for you." "Lies!" Ife's voice shook the heavens. "You took what was never yours. You let love blind you, and now the gods demand justice." Abeni's swollen chest ached with a pain deeper than flesh. This was no sickness, no simple curse. It was the weight of her own betrayal, made manifest by the wrath of the ancestors. The villagers stepped back in horror. The truth had been spoken, and now justice would come. The ground trembled beneath the feet of the villagers, a deep, rumbling anger rising from the earth itself. The fire at the center of the sacred grove swirled unnaturally, stretching toward the heavens like the hands of the forsaken. A great gust of wind tore through the gathering, snuffing out torches, sending embers dancing through the night. Mothers clutched their children, elders pressed their palms to their foreheads, muttering hurried prayers. Then her voice came. "Abeni." It was not the whisper of memory nor the echo of a dream. It was If, and she was here. The flames twisted, taking form, a woman, her eyes burning with pain, her lips trembling with rage. "You call upon the ancestors?" the spirit wailed. Then listen well, for they have sent me to deliver their justice. Abeni staggered backward, her breath shallow, her body frozen like a gazelle caught in the hunter's trap. Sister, she gasped, though the word barely passed her lips. But Ife's eyes were cold, her sorrow carved into the very wind. You stole what was mine. Ife's voice rose like the wailing storm, sending a shudder through the gathered crowd. The fire twisted, violently as the spirit moved, her ghostly form circling Abeni, the air heavy with judgment. Tunda's heart belonged to me. It was I who waited for him by the river, I who dreamt of our future. But you— Ife's voice cracked with pain. You let your own desires blind you. You took what was never yours. Abeni trembled. No, I did not know. I never meant to. Lies! Ife shrieked, her form flaring like a dying sun. The villagers gasped, some turning away, their faces etched with fear. I suffered alone, Ife wailed. The day Tunda left, my heart withered in my chest. You, my own blood, betrayed me. And now, you bear the weight of my suffering. Abeni fell to the ground, her hands clawing at the dust, her swollen chest heaving with the pain of a curse she now understood. Tears streaked Abeni's face as she collapsed to her knees, the world around, her fading into the sound of her own grief. I was blinded by love, she sobbed, her fingers curling into the earth beneath her. The villagers stood in silence, their gazes hard, their faith in her shattered by the spirit's revelation. Baba Orunmila stepped forward, his aged face unreadable, his staff planted firmly into the soil. Confession alone does not cleanse the soul, he declared, his voice heavy with finality. Abeni lifted her tear-streaked face, her lips trembling. What must I do? She whispered. The seer's eyes darkened as he cast the sacred cowrie shells upon the ground. A price must be paid. The air grew thick, the fire burned higher, wilder. Baba Orunmila studied the patterns in the earth, the shadows, shifting with each breath of the wind. The ancestors demand balance, he said at last. You may enter the spirit world to atone, or another must take your place. A murmur rippled through the villagers. A sacrifice? Abeni's heart pounded. Who would do such a thing? A voice whispered. Who would pay this price? Another asked. Abeni's throat tightened, her hands pressing against her swollen chest. She could not ask this of anyone, but before she could speak, a single voice rose. The hush that had fallen over the crowd shattered, like glass when Mama Efun stepped forward. Her face, lined with years of love and loss, held no hesitation. A mother does not let her child walk alone into the darkness, she said softly. Gasps echoed through the gathering. Abeni's breath caught, her heart clenching with dread. No, she choked, scrambling to her feet. No, mother, I will bear my own. Punishment! Mama Efun cupped her daughter's face, her fingers warm despite the cold wind whipping through the sacred grove. You are my child, she whispered. What is one life if it means saving yours? Abeni screamed, clutching at her mother's arms. Please, I cannot. But Mama Efun smiled, her eyes glistening with the weight of an eternal farewell. You will live, my child. And with that, she turned to the fire, kneeling before the spirits. The flames rose, wrapping around her like golden arms. A great wind howled through the village. The sky darkened. The earth trembled, and then silence. Abeni's breath came in gasps, her hands clutching her chest, the swelling gone. Her body felt light, as if she had been freed from the chains of her own sin. But at what cost? Before her, Mama Efun lay still. Her chest did not rise. Her lips, which had always whispered words of comfort, were now silent. The villagers bowed their heads, mourning both a mother's love and the price of justice. Baba Orunmila lifted his staff. The curse is lifted. Abeni fell against the earth, sobs racking her body. She had been saved, but she would carry this weight forever. The sun rose over Ilaomi, but its warmth did not reach the hearts of the people. Grief hung over the village like a thick fog, heavy and unmoving. Women wrapped themselves in dark cloth, their voices lifting in sorrowful wails that echoed through the valley. They mourned not only a mother, but a sacrifice, a woman who had given her life so that her daughter might live. Elders burned sacred herbs, their hands raised toward the heavens, whispering prayers to guide Mama Efun's soul safely to the land of the ancestors. Among them, Abeni stood apart. She did not wail. She did not whisper. Her heart felt as if it had been ripped from her chest, but no sound escaped her lips. She did not deserve to mourn. The villagers gathered beneath the great baobab tree, where those of honor were laid to rest. The tree's ancient roots stretched deep into the earth, binding the past to the present, the living to the dead. Baba Orunmila stood at the head of the grave, his frail hands shaking as he placed sacred white stones upon the mound of fresh earth. "Woman of great love rests here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She walks among the ancestors now, her soul unburdened, her spirit at peace." Abeni fell to her knees, her fingers clawing at the dirt, her sobs silent yet unrelenting. A hand touched her shoulder. She looked up into the weary eyes of an old woman. "She gave her life for you," the woman murmured. The words cut through her like a blade. But then another voice, a harsher one. "But will the gods accept her sacrifice? Or does her blood still stain your hands?" Abeni turned. A man stood among the mourners, his eyes cold. Others whispered, shifting uneasily. Forgiveness from the gods, perhaps, but from the living, that would not come so easily. The days passed, but the weight of the past did not lift. As Abeni walked through the market square, heads turned away. Some women whispered as she passed, "She carries death upon her shoulders. The gods spared her, but did not cleanse her. She is cursed still." She approached a fruit seller, her hands trembling as she reached for a mango. The seller's gaze hardened, and he turned his back to Abeni lowered her hand. She did not argue. In the village where she was once adored, she now walked alone. The gods had lifted her curse, but the people had not. One night, as the river murmured in the distance, Abeni sat alone, staring into the flames of a dying fire. She thought of her mother, of Mama Efun's trembling hand upon her face, of the soft whisper of her final words. "You will live, my child." But what was life if it was lived in exile? A thought formed in her mind. She could run, leave Ilaomi, escape the whispers, the stares, the burden of what she had done. But would that not be another betrayal? No, she could not run. She must atone. She must make her life mean something. In the months that followed, Abeni did not ask for forgiveness. Instead, she built a home on the edge of the village, a place for those who had been cast out, for women abandoned by their families, for children with no names. She worked with her hands, molding clay into bricks, weaving palm fronds into roofs. At first, no one came, but soon, a woman arrived, a widow left to fend for herself, then a girl, sent away after her belly began to swell with child, then another, and in time, the house was full. Abeni taught them what the past had taught her, that honesty is a light that cannot be buried, that love is not taking what is not yours, that redemption is not given, it is earned, and with each life she touched, the whispers of the village grew softer. The seasons changed, and the years passed. One evening, as the stars blinked awake, a messenger came to Abeni's doorstep. Baba Orunmila was calling for her. She found him by the river, where the water lapped, gently at the shore. The seer was old now, his once powerful frame bent with age, his voice softer but no less wise. "The ancestors have a message for you," he said, his eyes gleaming in the moonlight. "Come." Abeni followed him to the river's edge, her heart pounding. The water was unnaturally still. Abeni shivered as a soft wind stirred the reeds, rustled the trees. Then, a light. It shimmered over the river like a reflection of the moon, then took shape. Abeni's breath caught. Mama Efun stood before her, radiant, her spirit glowing like a golden ember. "My child," she whispered. Abeni fell to her knees. Tears streamed down her face. "I have tried, Mama," she sobbed. "I have tried to make amends. Have the gods seen?" Her mother smiled, a warmth Abeni thought she would never feel again. "They have." "Seen!" Abeni's heart ached with both relief and sorrow. "Have you forgiven me?" Mama Efun stepped forward, reaching out. "My child," she said softly, "you have carried this burden for long enough." Abeni closed her eyes as her mother's touch warmed her face. And then, like mist at dawn, Mama Efun faded into the night. Baba Oranmila watched in silence as Abeni sat by the river, her hands trembling in her lap. When she finally looked at him, her eyes were different. Lighter. Freer. The old seer nodded, his voice low. "Betrayal is a wound that does not fade. It lingers beyond death." Abeni bowed her head, understanding at last. Redemption was not seeking forgiveness. It was living a life worthy of it. And so she rose, and without looking back, walked toward the home she had built, a home for the lost, a home for those seeking their own redemption.